My number one on this list is one of the highest rated games that I have put on any of these disappointing games lists. Welcome and welcome back, everybody. Tia here, and today's video is bringing you another 5 games that I was particularly disappointed in. Now again, same old disclaimer, as y'all know, I'm not a board game wizard, I don't have all the knowledge of the universe, this is just my personal experience, and not to say that these are bad games, or that you are invalid if you have an opinion different than mine. I'm just sharing my experience with these games and hopefully some recommendations for other games you might enjoy, whether you liked these games or not. But without further ado, let's get started. My number 5 on this list probably won't upset too many people, and that's because a lot of you may not have heard of this game, Golem Arcana. This is a game that had really high promise in its conception of a miniatures-based game where you have a little pen that you're going to scan the miniatures with into an app, and they're going to do all sorts of cool powers and unique abilities. Needless to say, it fell very flat. Although the minis are gorgeous, although the idea of app integration into a miniature style game was cool, you would only control a handful of units during the course of the game, and the gameplay felt very abstract. One of the things that really turned me off was the fact that it was a lot of work to scan the base of each miniature for which attack you were going to do. You had to scan it in a certain spot, and although there were unique factions with cool abilities, again, you were limited on the number of characters you were using. Moving them around felt very abstract, and pretty much everything was run in-app, from their movement to the die rolls. There wasn't an option to manually roll dice and program them in. It was just the default was to roll the die through a number generator in the app, and then you would apply the effects to the board. So it felt like the board part of the game was an afterthought, and it would have been much better conceived as just a straight up video game, maybe with more miniatures and more things you could do. Honestly, the entire time I played it, I felt like I just wanted to be playing Age of Wonders or some other turn-based strategy game instead of having to then retroactively place the few things that were happening in the game back down onto my board. So as far as games go, if you're looking for something, there are plenty of miniature games, tactical games that you can play. Obviously Warhammer, if you're into that and looking for that, that's kind of the gold standard. But hopefully in the future, we'll get some more of these things with app integration and new and unique ways that will really assist the gameplay instead of kind of taking a step back and hindering it. But that is my number 5, Golem Arcana. Number 4 on this list is one that you may have heard of. It's a smaller box game from Girl Games, and that is Donut Drive-thru. Now, this is a game that by all means I should have loved. It is cute. It is a small package. I really love Girl Games, little box games like this, but unfortunately this one fell flat. It is basically a kid's game, but even with too much luck for that, because on each of your rolls to see whether you get enough pips in order to prepare and serve your buns, there's an automatic fail side which you cannot mitigate. So that alone for me was a little bit hurtful, especially knowing how bad I am with die rolling. There was some mitigation in terms of once you get your donuts served, you can turn them to get a coffee break, but then there was also an awkward management of your actions, which are these little donut tiles that you see here. And there would always be a build up to where you couldn't get enough back, and then you would have to take a turn that just really didn't feel great. The gameplay was, in theory, pretty good. Didn't quite work out in this small package. One alternative to this game is a game called Go Nuts for Donuts. It has a similar theme, similar artsy kind of chibi vibe with your donuts, but in this game you're going to be revealing a card simultaneously and then revealing it to bid on donuts for set collection. There's a lot more player interaction, there's a lot more strategy with which cards you bid for and your set collection with this game versus just getting the same kinds of donuts and then moving them through your line at harder difficulties. So if you like the idea of Donut Drive-thru, definitely check out Go Nuts for Donuts, but that is my number 4 for this list, Donut Drive-thru. My third game on this list is one that had a lot of promise, again, had app integration, but didn't quite work out, and that is Chronicles of Crime. So this is a game where you're going to be going around interviewing different suspects, traveling to locations in order to try to solve a mystery. And I'm a huge fan of those old point and click games of similar types of scenarios, but unfortunately, in this board game version, one big thing got in the way and just completely overrode any experience, any depth of story, or interesting ideas of mechanics, and that was the scanner. Now, I've heard that this has been improved for new versions of Chronicles of Crime, but the first game, we tried multiple different phones, multiple different devices, and it was always a hassle trying to get the cards scanned. We set up the best lights possible, and even then it was a challenge. I think one thing that could have been way easier and made this game a lot more playable is if each card, well, each card does have, as you can see here, a number in the corner or a location like a letter and a number, which could have easily been typed into the app if you're having trouble with scanning. But unfortunately, that didn't happen here. And while I was interested to play out the rest of the box and see the stories unfold, because there were some interesting twists, the fact that I had to sit there every time I wanted to scan a card and try to move it and focus it a million different ways really broke the immersion for me and quite honestly annoyed me. So while the game had a great idea in mind, I think it's been more fleshed out in newer versions. Like I said, I haven't personally tried them yet, but I am fingers crossed, looking forward to that and hoping it won't be a disappointment. Now, in the meantime, some of the games that I have been playing are the Unlock series, and these also utilize an app, but the app feels more like a tool to help facilitate the game versus a hindrance or versus something that is running the game. I feel like a majority of the game is happening in front of me with red and blue cards that connect together and different story elements that are coming up on cards. The app is really just secondary for sometimes scanning things, sometimes putting in codes to get an unlock. I think I think that this is a shining example of how apps can be integrated into story-based games, particularly puzzly mystery games, in a really solid way. So unfortunately, the original Chronicles of Crime didn't do it for me, but fingers crossed for some of the newer editions and that they've worked out some of those bugs. Next up is an expansion for a game that I was anticipating for literally years, and this is Targi, the expansion. I love Targi with all my heart. One of my favorite all-time two-player games. And I thought the expansion would add some really unique and cool elements like water that allow you to use it as a wild resource, and sand dunes, which let you override and break the basic mechanics of the game. And that's exactly what was wrong with this. So the original game Targi is so good because it is such a tight two-player worker placement game. And adding in a resource that could be used as anything made the game less punishing, which, in my opinion, was a selling point of the original game. The sand dunes, while they did have cool abilities, again, took mechanics that were so solid and didn't break them in a way that felt particularly inventive. It just felt like it was an out if you messed up on a previous turn or if your opponent did a good job of blocking you. So it took some of that strategy and depth and tension out of the game because you had these fail safes of this new resource and these other abilities that you could utilize if you found yourself in a tight corner. And again, in some games that could be great. But in Targi, that is one of the selling points of the game, is that it is so tight and that you are blocking out your opponent in a two-player worker placement game. That's the only way it works. Well, not the only way, but it's the best way that it works. So unfortunately, I would recommend the original game Targi if you're looking for a solid two-player worker placement game. However, I can't say that I was a huge fan of this particular expansion. My number one on this list is one of the highest rated games that I have put on any of these disappointing games lists. Might as well just get it over with. And that is Too Many Bones. I know that some people love this game to death. And to be fair, I can see why someone might really enjoy it. The production quality from Chip Theory Games is exceptional, but unfortunately, upon playing it, I realized it's essentially just another campaign game using miniatures, except this time, instead of miniatures, we have chips, which again, are beautiful and amazing and wonderful. However, it doesn't add a new depth of strategy to the actual gameplay. Even though you can stack the chips to show health and things like that, there are other ways that this have been done. So even if the implementation of the materials to show these characters was cool, the mechanics themselves didn't feel particularly new or unique. The other thing about this game that I really wanted to love was the leveling up of your dice based on different skill trees. Each skill tree I was really excited for because those are things I love. That comes from love of video games, leveling up your characters, seeing them get more powerful, seeing them get new abilities. But in this case, the dice are expendable. So even if you level up, you have to choose to activate that die, and then it's a one-time use. So it doesn't really feel like my character was getting stronger as a whole and having this arsenal of things that they could do. It was more so, when's the right time to use this ability, and then when's the right time to kind of refresh or get it back using bone symbols. The other part of this game that was really disappointing was the rulebook and the instructions. I mean, with any campaign game, let's be honest, it's going to be a slog to get through everything because there are so many moving parts, but this one honestly just really took it out of me in terms of watching through multiple playthroughs and reading the rules. It was just very confusing and hard to get into. I really, really wanted to like this game, but again, when you're creating such a large product and going up against so many other games that are similar, it might not always end in a great experience for everyone coming to the game. My kind of gold standard for length of game and one sitting type of game that I enjoy is really Runebound, which I've talked about in a previous video. Again, you can play it in different modes, semi-cooperatively, very competitively, or cooperatively, and it's a one-sitting type of game where the rules are very intuitive and straightforward. And I will say, even if it's not my personal cup of tea, as I've said before, Gloomhaven, I feel like that's a game that even if it wasn't my favorite game, within that realm of games really sets the standard for which I compare all other larger campaign, fantasy-esque dungeon crawling games to. And unfortunately, in this case, Too Many Bones fell flat comparatively. So unfortunately, Too Many Bones for me didn't quite do it. That's all the time we have for today. As always, please feel free to let me know down below if you agree or not and why I'm wrong. If there are other games that you have had personal experience with that were disappointing, feel free to drop those down in the comments below as well. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and click the like button. It really helps out the channel. Thanks again so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.